This summer marked the 85th anniversary of the British returning control of three strategically important ports and forts to the Irish state, and Spike Island in Cork Harbour was one of them.
It was first used as a prison by Oliver Cromwell, and in the 19th century was the largest in the world. Now, folklorist Shane Nahan has had an experience inmates could never have enjoyed: a stroll around the island.
I'm heading to an island I've been fascinated with all my life. It's got an incredible history, and I'm bringing with me my 360-degree camera, so I'm really looking forward to it. Spike Island, the Alcatraz of Ireland, if you like, the island that you couldn't get off. Being from Cork, you'd be very proud of Cork Harbour. Like, this is the largest natural harbour in all the Northern Hemisphere. After Sydney, it's the largest in the world. This island in the centre, this was a fort and later on it was a prison. So by walking around this island, I think we're going to get a very different perspective on what life was like in the past. So Spike Island, what an unusual name. Well, we have a fella called Macuda to thank for that. Macuda was a saint from Kerry in around the 7th century. He performed a few miracles for the local king here, and for doing that, he actually granted them this island. We're told that Macuda had his monastery here, and when he left a bishop in charge. So this became Inish Aspic, or the Bishop's Island. And because of that, of course, we get Inish Pic, and of course from that we get Spike Island. So, well done, Macuda. It's only walking around the perimeter of this island, 24 acres in total, and looking at that magnificent star-shaped fort designed by George Vallancey back in the late 1790s or thereabout. We always think about the engineer, we always think about the designers, but what we don't think about is who actually built it. And in fact, it were the convicts, the people who were incarcerated here, many of them awaiting transportation to Van Diemen's Land and further away. They're the ones who actually ended up building it here and putting the hard work in. So every time you look at a pier, and every time you look at huge stonework around here, that was all done by forced convict labour. So arduous was the task. Many of them suffered when they died in the process. And this is a cemetery on the island. I find this a very sad and unusual place. Just a few headstones against the wall. I see nothing but a blank space. And I always think to be named is to exist. And in this case, the extra humiliation, I suppose, for being a convict is to be buried without your people and to be forgotten about. Whether they were guilty of something, whether it was just or unjust, they were human beings on the planet. And to be forgotten about, I suppose, is, it's sad. I'm looking out at the mouth of the harbour and I'm thinking of how influential this harbour was in the time of the British Empire. Cork was exporting its butter, it was exporting its salted meats, its pork, its beef, its gunpowder to all the colonies. And all of the ships that went to the West Indies, went to the East Indies, they'd have all sailed through there. This is probably the best defended harbour in the world. I think of the battery of guns, the battery that replaced anyone that was coming in. And the French knew that, and everyone knew it from there on in. Mess with us at your peril. So here I am at the entrance of the fort, and wow, this is very impressive indeed. Of course, forts were really good for keeping people out, but of course, when this became a jail, it was also really good for keeping people in. So the gates are opening for me here, and I'm looking at the vista, and I'm thinking of all of the people who would have made their way in here, marched in, maybe against their will, to be incarcerated, maybe to be awaiting transportation. I have the easy passage in, but you can see the vista of the fort in the interior. And what I find really interesting about this is that there's nothing about the lovely view of Cork Harbour. There's nothing about the entire place, how wonderful it looks outside. I can't see anything except raw buildings and military fortification, a place of incarceration. So this fort functioned as a prison back at the end of the 19th century, the early 20th century. But the one that I remember, and everyone will remember, was Spike Island Prison, the Irish Alcatraz, if you like. And it was famous because in 1985, there was a riot here. And the riot came about because they took all of the, let's call them the worst prisoners from all the different prisons throughout Ireland, and they brought them all down here. There was a need for spaces and so on. And this was a recipe for chaos. Very soon, when all the prisoners arrived, they rioted. They escaped out of the buildings. They scaled down the walls. But when they got outside, of course, there was no opportunity for them to go anywhere. They got an old JCB and they rammed in the front gates again. So I think it's the first time ever that prisoners actually decided to break back into a prison. So that was a situation that has lasted in my memory and in modern folklore, if you like. I, for one, am really taken by the contrasts that I've seen here. The sea, the sky, the vistas, everything about it on the outside of the island. And how that contrasts perhaps with the guns that you see, the prison inside and the difficult life that was there. But I suppose it's important to think that, history is made up of the good and the bad, the positive and the negative. And this visit today has reminded me and brought me back to seeing those contexts both at the same time. It's a great place to visit.
What a fascinating place, and it's fast becoming a cultural hub too, with a literary festival later in August and a music event in September. So thank you very much indeed, Shane Nahan. Now, still to come, who would have thought that a